Hello and welcome to CB8 Speaks. I'm Dave Liston. I'm a former chair of Manhattan Community Board 8. I co-chair the Health, Seniors, and Social Services Committee. And as a member of our Communications Committee, it's my privilege to host this episode of CB8 Speaks. CB8 Speaks is the television show of Manhattan Community Board 8. It's a way in which our board focuses attention on issues of interest to New Yorkers in general, and particularly of interest to the more than 200,000 people that live in the district that we represent, a district that runs from Roosevelt Island to Fifth Avenue, from 96th Street to 59th Street. On this episode, I am so very happy and so very honored to welcome to our show New York City Council member Dan Garodnick. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you with us.
It's good to be here, Dave.
You are already so well known, I'm sure, to many or all of our viewers, but by way of brief background, Councilmember Garodnick is a native New Yorker. He grew up in Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village. After practicing as an attorney at a prominent New York law firm and many years of community service, he was elected to the New York City Council in 2005. Dan represents District 4, a large area on the east side of Manhattan, which includes a substantial portion of the area that our district, Community Board 8's district, is included with. Dan was recognized by City Hall's newspaper as a rising star under 40. The Wall Street Journal described Dan as smart and fair. The Daily News recognized Dan as one of the most effective legislators in the New York City Council, and the New York Times praised Dan's independent streak. Perhaps less well known is the fact that Dan and his wife Zoe and their children are volunteers with the Holy Trinity Neighborhood Center, which is an organization near and dear to my heart and that serves many of our homeless neighbors on the Upper East Side. Dan, I always enjoy seeing your culinary talent combined with your dedication to serving our neighbors.
It's my pleasure.
You have demonstrated a leadership role in so many different ways. I'd like to talk today about at least a few of those, because I know these are going to be issues that are important to you and important to our viewers. The first thing I'd like to talk about is privacy and protecting privacy. E.B. White wrote years ago that New York, for all its size and density, offers the gift of privacy. That gift is increasingly challenged in our city, and my understanding is that you share the concern that many of us have with regard to that. Can you talk a little bit about the issue and what you're doing to deal with it?
Sure, and thank you again for having me. It's great to be here with you and to talk to the viewers and people who are interested in what Community Board 8 and the east side of Manhattan are doing. Privacy is an issue which affects everybody in New York. We live in very close proximity to one another, but that does not mean that everything we do is a public matter, right, or that it should be a public matter. And you think about issues like the privacy of your data when you're riding a taxi, or the fact that we've seen a proliferation of drones, or that there's the ability for landlords frequently to perform an apartment inspection on very little notice. People, I think, frequently feel a little ill at ease, uncomfortable, and as if their privacy has been invaded. Now, these circumstances are not situations where the government is going in and invading privacy. They're usually a dynamic between private actors. So if you take the existence of apartment inspections, for example, there is a rule on the books which allows for a landlord to visit the apartment of their tenant with 24 hours notice for an inspection. It's not a lot of notice.
No, it sure isn't.
People frequently do not even get notice that their apartment is about to be visited. And as a result, there are unfortunate surprises. People get scared. 7 days is the window of time for a non-emergency improvement. The problem here is not that you necessarily have bad actors out there. It's just that when you are talking about your apartment, your home, you deserve to enjoy it in peace, without intrusion. So we are changing the rules, and we're going to require that landlords give a little more notice to tenants and that it be in the form that the tenants prefer. If it's an email, it's an email. If it's under the door, it's under the door. Instead of 24 hours, it'll be 72 hours. Instead of 1 week, it will be 2 weeks. So tenants have a little more security to know that nobody is just going to surprise them when they are in their own sanctuary. Taxi safety, you know, we have the proliferation of all of these taxi apps like Uber or Lyft or others. And there's very little understanding for the public as to how data that you submit on these apps is being stored, used, processed. It was a very unfortunate story about Uber, which had followed around a reporter who had written an unfavorable story about them using the technology that they have available. So I have a bill that would curb the practices of use of any personal data for anything other than what it was submitted for, which is paying the bill. Drones are another example that we have very poor rules in New York City today on the use of drones. They have not proliferated yet to a point where people are really concerned about them, but they are going to proliferate in New York City in the absence of rules, and we need to make sure that our regulations keep up with the technology that is out there so that people don't have drones flying and inspecting their backyards or looking into their windows, and that we have the ability to enforce against that.
Let's shift gears a little bit to the Senior Citizens Rent Increase Exemption, SCREE. I know that you've worked hard to encourage people to register for SCREE. Can you talk with us a little bit about what SCREE is and why it's important that people register for it?
Definitely, and I'm glad you brought it up because this is an issue for senior citizens in our area who earn under $50,000 a year and pay more than a third of their income in rent and live in a rent-regulated apartment. They may be eligible for this program which freezes their rent. So if somebody falls into that category and they are watching this show right now, they need to call 311, call my office at 212-818-0580, get the forms, fill them out. There are thousands of senior citizens on the east side of Manhattan who are eligible today but are not taking advantage of this program, and we are trying to spread the word that it exists and that they're leaving money on the table, and we're trying to, to push that word out as far as possible. So I'm glad you asked about it, and people should really be focusing on this opportunity.
And speaking of housing, let's talk about tenant relocation specialists. What are they? Why are they of concern? What are you doing about it?
So we have seen in New York, and this is not really a great thing that we have seen recently, but an effort to push rent-stabilized tenants out of their apartments. They certainly did it in Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village, where they did it in a large-scale effort, paid lots of money. The business plan was designed to get rent-stabilized tenants out of their apartments as quickly as possible. We now see this everywhere, where landlords with an interest to convert a building to market-rate units, to get rid of particular rent-stabilized tenants, they hire what is known in the industry as a tenant relocation specialist, which you can even tell by the name.
Sounds like a euphemism.
That is not going to be good for you.
Right.
Now, some people say, well, wait a minute, they're coming to your door, they're offering you a check to move. What could possibly be bad about that? And the answer is almost everything is bad about that, because if you reject their offer, they keep coming back and back and back. If you tell them, I do not want to see you again, they will pursue you in every way they possibly can. It becomes less of an opportunity and more of a demand. We are trying in the council to put forth a set of rules, a registration procedure for tenant relocation specialists, give them a license, a required dynamic when they're engaging with tenants, and to allow for real penalties when they do things that are inconsistent with the rules that we set. We're trying to put a layer of government between these guys and the tenants that they are pursuing, in the interest of protecting tenants' rights. By the way, we did the same thing with process servers.
I remember.
And there was another industry where process servers were simply preying on mostly defenseless individuals by claiming to have served them papers where usually a credit card company had sued them for for debts that were owed. the paperwork never arrives. They default on the case, find themselves locked up with obligations in court, and their bank account is frozen, wages garnished, all because somebody didn't actually do what they were supposed to do in serving papers. So we put rules on that industry too. And you don't want to do this in every situation.
Right.
But these are two industries where I thought that in the interests of consumers, in the interests of defendants, in the interest of tenants, that we need to act and to create some sort of rules and regs to ensure good behavior.
Let's shift gears now to the Department of Corrections and the New York City Police Department. I understand that you have been working on potential proposed reforms related to both organizations with regard to transparency and accountability. Can you discuss that with us?
Definitely. And both organizations, I think, can do a lot better when it comes to sharing their practices and procedures with the public. Rikers Island has gotten a lot of press recently about bad acts against people who are in the facility. And my view here, and I'm sure that every New Yorker would agree, that it doesn't matter what you've been accused of doing. It doesn't matter what you actually did. If you are in the possession of the city of New York and the custody of the city of New York, you deserve to have certain basic civil rights. And it has gotten so bad in Rikers that the Justice Department is pursuing the city of New York today. And we need to make sure that we are doing our job as the local council to be able to understand what exactly is happening over there. So there was a big package of bills that was introduced. I sponsored a bunch of these bills. We just had the hearing recently. And it would essentially disclose the practices of the equivalent of solitary confinement. So anytime that somebody is separated off from the mainstream in Rikers and given an alternative space or location or time frame, they would need to disclose that. Population statistics within the jails, and also the rules of engagement between officers and prisoners. And that's really what we want from NYPD too. We asked them to put their patrol guide online. A lot of people don't really understand how the NYPD operates. And we thought, for the benefit of the public, it's a very impressive document. It has a lot of the rules that the NYPD, offers, and when they are trainees that they have to learn. The only way to access it today is to buy it for $55 in a supply store or foil it from city government. Pieces of it are already out there online. My view is, let's put the accurate version online so people can actually digest it, process it. If they have questions about it, they'll be able to know what happens. It actually came from a constituent call. Somebody called up and said, hey, I'm curious to see what the police rules are on this. Do you have a copy of the NYPD patrol guide? We did a little staff work and realized that that was just not available or accessible even to a local city council office. So that's a reform that I think is an obvious. We're going to try to do the same thing in corrections. And I think, above all, we want to support our corrections officers. We want to support our police officers. But there really should be no barrier of information between the rules and what the public has access to. Will allow for better conversation for us all to understand what the right dynamic is.
That's great. There's another topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, and it's an area near to our district, East Midtown. We probably could dedicate an entire show to your work in that area. Can you walk?
That's fine. We can do that,
Why don't
Dave.
we do
That's
that?
fine.
Let's at least start on this one. Can you sort of walk us through what the issues are there and what you've done with regard to them?
Sure. Well, the effort to rezone East Midtown started as far back as the Bloomberg administration. You may recall that Mayor Bloomberg had put forth a rather significant rezoning proposal for East Midtown from 39th Street to 57th Street. And his premise, which I happen to agree with, is that Midtown Manhattan has gotten less competitive. It's gotten stuck in antiquated zoning rules, which have made it either impossible or a situation where nobody has the incentive to build anything new in East Midtown. The zoning rules go back to 1982. There are a lot of buildings in East Midtown that are today overbuilt. If you knocked them down, you couldn't even build them back up to where they are today. And he said, we should get East Midtown unstuck. He was right. The problem was that he proposed it in the waning days of his administration. He had proposed a structure that, in my view, gave plenty of certainty to the development community, but not all that much certainty to the public. And when you're talking about rezoning a significant area of Midtown Manhattan, one in which we want to have Class A office space, but we also want to have a Class A office district that goes along with it, where our infrastructure needs, our transit needs are enormous, I didn't feel like we had the ability to do a well-considered, well-thought-out plan in the time that we had left in his administration. He also had proposed certain things like having the city selling air rights at $250 a square foot across the district, no matter where you were. And I had concerns about pricing that at a particular dollar amount, whether you're on 39th and 3rd or 57th and Park, did not make sense to me. So I opposed that plan, and Mayor Bloomberg ultimately withdrew it. What was born, however, was a new plan which was brought forth in what will be two parts. The first part is a rezoning of Vanderbilt Avenue. It's not in CB8, but it's close. Okay. And it's from 42nd to 47th Street.
So we can see it from there.
You can almost see it from Community Board 8, exactly.
Can you sort of walk us through what the issues are there and what you've done with regard to them?
Sure.
And it's the heart of Manhattan in many ways.
Right, exactly. It affects everybody, whether they're East Siders or whether they come from any corner of the city. What happens in and around Grand Central affects their lives. So the first phase of this rezoning is that small area, 42 to 47 in Vanderbilt. And we worked on this proposal with the new mayor, Mayor de Blasio, and the new City Planning Commission Chair, Carl Weisbrod. And what this plan does is that it allows for a property owner on that corridor to build a more significant building, if they are there, by coming to the city for approval or by buying air rights from a landmark. If you buy air rights from a landmark, you can do that. You still need to come to the city for approval. And if you want to take the new route, which is to do infrastructure improvements in exchange for density improvements, you can do that too. So the fundamental premise is here, we open the door to the possibility that we will allow buildings to be built bigger in exchange for infrastructure improvements to the transit system at Grand Central. That is something that has never happened at this scale before. And the reason why it's important is that we have enormous needs in Grand Central. I mean, anybody who has ridden the Lexington Avenue line knows that it is burdened well beyond its capacity. There's about 700,000 people who pass through Grand Central every day on that line. At some points, in the peak hours, 50,000 an hour, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. They need relief, and they need improvements to the dynamic in Grand Central to allow trains to move faster, to allow for there to be less crowding on the platforms, to allow better access and egress points throughout the area. So we have a first applicant, a building, 42nd Street and Madison Avenue. The full block has asked for permission to build bigger in exchange for improvements to Grand Central. And we have granted them that approval because we believe—
It's a win-win.
It sure is. The improvements that they have identified with the MTA at a cost of about $220 million, they are things that will actually improve the rider's experience. So when you think about, ways to improve the platform, narrowing the staircases, eliminating some of the columns, allowing another train per hour to come through at the morning and evening rush, to create better connectivity between the system and the future East Side access. it's a huge package of improvements that will go a long way to helping the rider experience there. And of course, the building, when built, will be a 63-story building. It will provide 5,200 union construction jobs, 190 permanent union jobs, and then of course, not even to mention the people who will work in the the various entities that will be located in that building. And the city will get $50 million a year in property taxes. So this is a good deal. It's a good proposal, and something that I'm pleased to support. That's phase one, though.
What about phase two?
There's still that. Phase two is the rest of East Midtown.
Okay.
So that's the area from 39th Street to 57th Street. That's basically the greater East Midtown area. And that, you can really almost see that one from community boarding. We're getting warmer for sure. And I have the privilege of chairing a steering committee with the borough president, Gail Brewer, to look at ways to best and most sensibly rezone the rest of this turf, and to ensure public infrastructure and public realm improvements, while also trying to get it unstuck from the development perspective so that people have some incentive to build there. As a result of this work, East Midtown is most certainly back. It needs to continue to be a commercial core for New York and for the world. And we're taking this opportunity to both add development opportunity while also delivering great goods for the public on our mass transit system. By the way, the MTA capital budget has a $14 billion gap in a $32 billion budget. So these improvements, these may never actually have materialized. We will see them before this building is occupied as per the rules that we have written.
That is very exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
Something we can all look forward to. It's going to change our city for the better for a long time to
Definitely
come.
will. People will, they will know this project, they will know these improvements, and I don't know if they'll even, remember this conversation, but they will definitely be happy to see these changes.
No doubt about it. Dan, I remember back in 2005, if I remember correctly, I had the privilege of serving as the MC at your inauguration. And I remember what a thrill that was. And I remember the excitement and the energy surrounding your election and your inauguration. And that excitement and that energy has clearly continued. When you look back on the past few years and when you look ahead to the years to come, can you tell us about some of the other accomplishments that you're most proud of and the goals that remain to be done that you look forward to accomplishing?
Mm-hmm. Issues that I have felt most proud of over time have been the issues where I have the chance to stand up for my neighbors on an individual basis or as a community. People who are under siege for one reason or another, whether it's from debt collectors or whether it's from unscrupulous landlords, or even from, in one case, the sale of an entire community for an extraordinary sum designed to push people out of their apartments.
Peter Cooper.
And Peter Cooper in Stuyvesant Town. And
where you grew up.
Exactly. The results of that reality out there over the last 10 years was that I had occasion to introduce some very meaningful bills, whether it was to protect tenants from harassment, give them a right to fight back in court when a landlord was doing unscrupulous things to them to get them out of their rent-stabilized apartment. We formed a coalition against predatory equity, where I brought, with my colleagues, Jamani Williams and Richie Torres, about 50 or 55 elected officials from all levels of government together to fight back against these practices where people will buy properties with the sole purpose of trying to convert them into something that they are not, and to get New Yorkers out of their apartments as quickly as possible. We have fought back on that. We've had some great successes. And of course, you mentioned Stuyvesant Town specifically. When that property was sold, we defended tenants one at a time. We set up legal clinics. We gave people a clear understanding of their rights, the tools to fight back against these practices. And the result was that the landlord ultimately was not able to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish at the outset. And many people were kept in their apartments as a result of our advocacy. So I think that the short answer is standing up for my neighbors, both individually and as a collective group. And what remains, we got to finish up East Midtown. Part 2 still remains, still hanging out there. I have a list of bills that's a mile long that's still, you know, I've only got 2.5 years left here. There's some good things out there that we want to do. And to continue to be a local representative that people feel comfortable turning to help fix problems to the extent that I can. And it's, you know, this has been a great honor to represent this district for, you know, for almost 10 years now.
It seems like you really enjoy it.
I do. I really do.
And we are so grateful to you for what you've done for the city at large, for the people in our district, and for the communities throughout the city. You've made this place a better city. And we wish you all the best. We hope you'll come back on the show.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate
soon
it.
And often.
Well, we'll have to do that special show.
Absolutely. Have a series.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.